Okay, today we're gonna talk about what you need to know before you buy the juiced rip racer. This video is not gonna be content where you're gonna see me prancing around on this on the street. There's plenty of videos out there on YouTube that are for that. Today I wanted to go over the specifics of who I think it's for, what problems people have been complaining about, how I feel about them, and how I ultimately chose this bike and how I feel about it now. Okay, so we're gonna take a look at the juiced rip racer. And this is a BMX style bike. And one of the main reasons I picked this one, or it ended up on my list of bikes to buy, is because I guess in America, I'm short. I'm 5'7". And so there's a lot of bikes out there that are super heavy, super big. And so I knew that I needed a bike that was gonna be fairly small. And so this BMX bike, the style you would think is actually smaller than it is. When you build any bike and when you see it off the website and then when it actually comes to your house, it's gonna be much bigger and much heavier than you think. This is not a sponsored video and there's no link in the description. If you're looking at the juiced rip racer, you're gonna know exactly where to get it. And so the juiced rip racer, let's get the price out of the way because I know everyone's kind of curious about that and it should matter. What you're looking at here is gonna be $1,600. So it's $1,600, it's about $1,590 something after tax with the stock accessories. So we're gonna go over that, and then in addition to the stock accessories, I added about $75 worth of main accessories, but I'm not gonna waste your time going over all the small accessories. We'll do a separate video about that. I know you just wanna learn about the rip racer and whether to get it or not, and then move on with your life. Okay, so let's go over it like super quick. This is the class 3 bike and it was on sale for $1,299, so $1,300. And then we have the rack that came with it. Or actually it's an additional, and then this rack that was also additional, and that's where we got the $1,600 after tax. And so the things I added aftermarket were this pad that was $15, this motorcycle peg for rear passenger for $15 as well, and then this net was only $7, and the brakes. So out of the box, a lot of e-bikes are like this, and I'm not knocking on juiced or even the electric bike, but a lot of the bikes out of the box are gonna be squeaky. And so there's this thing called bedding them where you're basically getting the glaze off the first layer of the pad, and then they supposedly continue to work well. But for me, that did not work for either of these bikes. And so I replaced the metallic or semi-metallic pads with resin. And so I changed to resin pads on both sides, and the total cost of that was about $15 for the pads after tax. You can buy them much cheaper on either Amazon or AliExpress, but that's happens to be what I did because I was in a hurry and I wanted to silence those brakes. So a lot of people have complained, actually more people I think complain about the screeching noise of the brakes than people have not. So it's definitely something you're gonna expect to have to replace, the front pads and the rear pads. I almost forgot the last major thing was just this seat post, and that was $2,150 plus tax. All right, let's talk about use case. Okay, so you notice I have a passenger pad with the peg. This is not designed for passengers. Although Juiced back in the day when they first designed it and released this to the public or was talking about it upcoming, they did have options of a rear passenger pad and foot pegs. However, when it was finally released, it was not included as an option. You can't even buy it. So Juiced right now does not necessarily promote having a passenger in the back because the weight limit is actually only 65 pounds for the rear rack. One thing about that, a lot of people are like, oh, I can put someone so much heavier because I found a rack that has a higher weight limit. And so if that rack is the kind that mounts to the back of this guy, and you're getting on Amazon, it says 130 pounds, that is not real, okay? That pound weight limit is for the bike being static, meaning not moving. And so it doesn't matter what the weight limit is for a bike if it's not moving, because obviously if you're gonna have someone on the back, it's gonna be moving. So don't think of having a passenger that's more than just a child. If you do wanna do that, I guess you can do it this way, but this is not what the bike was meant for, and it's not necessarily what I personally would recommend. I think people who are looking to buy this bike are looking to ride it solo and maybe attracted to it because it's 52 volts. So let's go over 52 volts, okay? The bike up here, which I built back in the day, is a 48 volt bike. And the bike here, the electric Expedition, is also a 48 volt bike. So if you're looking at the rip racer, you know that 52 volts is up there, okay? And it's exciting. And then you're like looking at the budget or your own budget, and you're like, okay, it's close to $1,000. The class 2 is $1,000 right now. And maybe I wanna get it, but should I compromise on it being only a single speed? Okay, so one thing about that, because I rode these 3 bikes back to back on back-to-back days, so very fresh in my mind. I've had that bike for 14 years, recently modified that to get a little bit more power maybe half a year ago. And then this guy I got last November of 2022, and then the Expedition, I only took delivery of it 2 weeks ago, less than 2 weeks ago. So I'm not gonna do any review on that until we get hundreds of miles on that. I've had over 1,000 miles on it, 1,046 or something like that. So I have some words to say about the voltage. So 52 volts, no matter what the voltage is, unless it is a dual motor, do not expect it to just climb hills like nothing. Okay, I live in San Francisco. There are big hills. This does not climb San Francisco hills like it's nothing, especially a single gear. Okay, but it does manage. And the interesting thing is that the way the controller is built and the way that Juiced has put all the pieces together and determined what size motor and how the controller works and the wheel size and the weight and all that kind of stuff, it actually handles very well on hills, despite it being only single gear. And a lot of that has to do with it being 52 volts. If you're gonna be riding over hill every single day and you hate hills, then you're gonna want a bike with more gears, okay? But the advantage of this, and even though I live in San Francisco on top of a hill, so where I have to ride home up the hill every time I come home with this, I am okay with it because the 52 volts is great on flats and on slight inclines and is just so much fun. A lot more fun than the 48 volt bikes that I've ridden that were retail that come out of the factory as 48 volts. So 52 volts is legitimately better, I would say, and definitely worth the compromise of it being single gear if you're not scared of hills and if you are not going hill over hill over hill over hill. And I'm talking about hills, okay? I'm not talking about little inclines. If you're living in some area where there's just this tiny little incline like you see on YouTube videos, then you'll be fine, okay? But if you're on a San Francisco hill, like a serious hill, where in one snapshot of this camera, you can't see the top and the bottom of the hill, then it's a real hill. And it's gonna be challenging going up there. And putting my daughter on there, who's about 55 pounds, going up that hill is almost impossible. It's not something I would do again. So I do take a different route to get home because of the weight of her on here going up the hill on a single gear, but it is possible. My younger son, who weighs a little bit less and probably about 50 pounds or maybe high 40s, I can get him up the hill with a challenge and it works, but it's not something that you would want to buy the bike to do. But if you had to do it or if you wanted to do it, then it's definitely possible. I do want to go as far as to say that people are going to argue with me, okay? You're going to argue with me in the comments and people are going to get all defensive, but you probably don't want to buy an e-bike to carry a passenger. I know. It seems fun. It seems like, yeah, put your girlfriend on the back, put your wife on the back, your husband, your partner, your friends, whatever. And it seems like a blast, okay? But it will kill the range, okay? Drastically, it will kill the range. And it will be slow. And if it's not slow, then you're running it too hard and you're hurting the motor and you're stressing it out and it's not good, okay? So running an e-bike with a passenger is kind of a big deal. I know on YouTube, I know on websites, they're like, it can take a passenger, it has, X, load capacity, it's like 200 pounds, 300 pounds, 400 pounds. You're not really gonna wanna do that, okay? Unless it's a cargo bike. And even then, riding a cargo bike, a bike that is longer and heavier than you're used to, than most people are used to, is a challenge. I mean, my wife does not get on our cargo bike. Neither her or myself trust her on their cargo bike because it's heavier and just the way the dynamics of it with weight on the back and even with no weight on the back, just the fact that it's longer has a very different riding characteristic that not everyone is going to be comfortably able to handle. And so that's not knocking on people like, oh, you can't ride a bike. It's just by physics, it's bigger, it's longer, it has a much bigger learning curve. And I know you see people all over the streets, especially in urban areas, riding those cargo bikes, and it seems like everything's so easy. I do think it's very dangerous for a lot of people who are not as used to it. And they may be getting a little bit excited because they're able to do it so far. But the moment a car comes in front of them, the moment someone runs a red light, or there's a pedestrian, or there's a ball that rolls in the street, or something unusual, it's gonna be tough to handle. Okay, so back to the rip racer, okay? It's gonna be for a single rider, and do not think that is a bad thing and that is a compromise, okay? E-bikes, single rider, really. If you're gonna have someone else ride, it's much better to get a second bike, okay? The experience of riding with someone else is fun, okay? I'm not gonna deny that. And it may actually be worth buying a cheaper bike and getting two, or convincing that person to buy the bike, okay? And then riding together, and it's not the best bike, but the experience would be better, okay? But if you're like me and your wife is not interested in this stuff, and your friends don't necessarily have e-bikes and don't want to get all into it, and you're riding this by yourself majority of the time, then it's great. And it's worth the 52 volts, and it's worth jumping to class 3 if you want to, okay? I'm gonna have a separate video about class 3 versus class 2. Actually, let's just go over it now, okay? Class 2 versus class 3. Okay, I know a lot of people are thinking about that, especially the rip racer, because class 2 is on sale right now for $9.99, and class 3 is available for $300 more. And percentage-wise, that's gonna be a lot, and a lot of people looking into these budget bikes, $300 is gonna be a big percentage of the budget, so I understand that that number means a lot. Even if you're gonna have it for over years and years, $300, I can appreciate means a lot. So, bike helmets are going to be standard bike helmets, okay, not this one, is rated for 20 miles per hour, okay? And e-bike helmets are rated for 28 miles per hour. And so, and legally, in most states, anything higher than that in the 30 mile per hour range is going to be considered a moped, okay? Classified as a moped, which means turn signals, which means license, which means registration, which means insurance. Okay, so it's a very, very different vehicle once you hit 30 miles an hour. So objectively, 30 miles an hour is very fast. 28 miles an hour is pretty close to 30 miles an hour, and that's very fast. Okay, so 20 miles an hour, do not be shy about riding a bike that only goes 20 miles an hour. 20 miles an hour is more than sufficient for most people. And I know it's gonna be exciting, and I know some people are looking at RC cars and they're like, faster and faster, 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 stronger, better, bigger batteries. No, you want it lightweight. Okay, this guy is lightweight, and that's 48 volts. And that goes faster than the rip racer by a long shot. And that's because I built that as an overvolted bike, which essentially means that there's more voltage going through it than the motor is designed for, and so therefore it spins very, very fast. Okay, it's not going to be good for longevity, but I do pedal with that. I pedal with all the bikes. Okay, that's another thing. When you're buying a bike, e-bike, pedal. Okay, it's not about throttling as fast as you can go. Okay, now I got to talk about this a little bit more seriously. Okay, because on YouTube you see all these guys testing e-bikes. Okay, review, e-bike review, and then let's see how it does on throttle only. In reality, you're not gonna ride throttle only, okay? Let me tell you why they do this, okay? Number one is because people wanna know, and number two is maybe that's the only way to consistently gauge how well a bike does compared to another bike. But guess what? When they do those reviews, they don't often do it back to back comparing to another bike. So throttling uphill is not something you're gonna do practically, okay, at all. Okay, so if you're gonna want a motorcycle, get a motorcycle. If you want a moped, get a moped. This is an e-bike, okay? You're gonna go under 28 miles an hour, you're gonna enjoy it, you're gonna wear a helmet, and please follow the laws. Okay, back to the rip racer. What is so cool about the rip racer, okay? The fact that it's juiced, they are an American company, okay? So an American company will care about their reputation in America and will have support in America. So you'll have access to people who can help you through issues or problems, or at least someone to blame locally. The last thing you want to do is go on Amazon and just look for a bike that has an arbitrary budget that matches yours, and then hope for the best, okay? So if you're looking at this, hopefully you do value an American company, okay? And the owner of Juiced is very transparent, and I love following their videos, and they do testing in China, where it's manufactured, and then they do quality control, and they look over all the bikes and all that kind of stuff. So it's very, very good as far as the company, and 12 years old, okay? A lot of these companies, like even electric, as popular as they are only about 3 years old, okay? So they're still kind of learning. Juiced has been in the game for a very, very long time. So that's something that you can be assured of when you're buying from this company. Again, not sponsored, it's just it's one of the reasons why I picked the Juice myself. Okay, the battery, why is this battery so cool? And why is it $700 by itself? Okay, number one is it's a metal casing, okay? It's not plastic like the other stuff that you see online for other bikes. And then this is, again, 52 volts, and this is 15.6 amp hours, okay? So it's fairly decent range and very good voltage. And this thing has a handle. I know, I might be over-exaggerating how great it is, but when you're having a battery this big, having a handle is actually a very good thing to be able to hold that handle, because if this battery drops, it's not going to be a good thing. Okay, another cool feature about it is going to be the gauge. Okay, so when I take the battery out, oh, another thing is when you take the battery out, there's going to be the on button so that you can turn this on. And the reason why they hid that behind here is so that if you're parking your bike, then no one can just kind of go to the screen and start turning it on, right? They're going to have to access the battery to turn it on. So if you're going to park for extended period of time, it might be a good idea to use your key, pop this battery open for a second, press the button to turn it off, close it back in so that no one can use the battery, even if they are able to break your lock or whatnot. Okay, behind here is going to be your charge port. Okay, that is the charge port. Again, this is the keyhole to open it. One complaint that people have had about the battery, and I think it's user error because I've never had that issue, is people have trouble putting the battery into the frame. And the idea is you're gonna have to pivot it along this point and then either keep it unlocked with your key inserted and just shove it in, or you don't even need to use the key. Majority of the time I just push it in and it goes in just fine. All right, another thing people complain about is spinning out, okay? Meaning ghost pedaling, meaning you're pedaling so much that you're running out of gears and there's no resistance. And this is not specific to Juiced. A lot of bikes, e-bike riders kind of complain about that because they're trying to go fast and the motor provides so much help that they're running out of gears. But some people will change the chainring size to something even bigger than that, which I think is kind of big. The gearing and the speed for me and the way I use it is perfectly fine. And for whatever reason, the size, the ratio of this crankset and the motor and all the other components make it for a bike that performs very well as a single gear. Very, very surprised. Another thing people complain about is this faux fork. So this looks like a suspension fork, even has a little thing, but this is a rigid fork. There is zero suspension on it. It is just the look of it. So a lot of people, again, not a lot, but some people will decide to replace that with a real suspension fork. And that's probably gonna cost you maybe $200-ish. And so that obviously adds to the cost of the bike. And that's not something I ever plan to do. All my bikes have had rigid forks and hardtails, zero suspension. So I'm totally fine with that. All right, as much as this bike appears to be a step through, it is not really a step through. This is quite high, unless you're like 6 feet tall. I mean, I'm not gonna be able to really go like that and stick my leg over, especially when you have a water bottle cage, or in my case, a bracket for a lock, then you're not really gonna be able to swing your leg over. Think of it as just a regular bike. It's not gonna be a step through style. One cool thing about this bike is the handlebars. Because it's a BMX style, it's a very upright seating position, which is very comfortable for long rides. And the fact that you can angle this closer to you or further away fairly drastically. So it has a big range of reach as far as for different sized riders. One thing that people complain about, not just with Juice, but with every single e-bike ever in the world, literally, is the seat. People say the seat is too hard. I will tell you why people think the seat is too hard. Because most e-bike riders, e-bike buyers, are new to cycling. They haven't ridden bicycles for like 20 years. And they think that having a motor will solve all the problems, and they've always wanted to ride a bike, but don't want to sweat and don't want to be wearing certain gear. And they think the e-bike will solve all the problems. So they get on a bike and they forget that that's how a bike seat feels like, okay? It's not a couch. It's not supposed to be soft. It's not supposed to be super comfortable. But if you want, yes, you can change the seat to like a Cloud9 or some sort of brand that has more plush or cush for your tush, okay? But the seat's gonna be like any other seat. it is a bike seat. This is indeed a brake light, okay? The bike over there has a tail light, which means when you engage the brake, the light does not turn on. It's just a light that's on all the time as long as the headlights are on. And that is fairly common with e-bikes. The fact that this has an actual brake light, meaning when you turn on the headlight and you engage the brakes on the handle, the light turns from red to brighter red. So it is a legitimate brake light. And that's something you should be aware of that you're buying that other bikes don't necessarily have. I made a separate video of exactly how wide this is. Okay, this is a 4-inch tire. A lot of fat tire bikes are 3.5 to 4 inches. 4 inches is a lot, okay? I actually wish this bike was not a fat tire bike. I actually wish this bike was either 3 inches. I think 3 inches or 3.25 would be perfect. Right now, the fact that it's so big, it's so massive, it's a lot less efficient than if it were thinner. Because if it was thinner, it would be lighter, it would cut through a lot better. Obviously, you're not gonna be able to go through sand. A lot of people are riding e-bikes, fat tire e-bikes through sand. I would never ever do that. Not that I'm recommending against it, I'm just saying that's not something I have any interest in doing. And so I personally wish that Juiced had a non-fat tire e-bike. And I do think the whole fat tire thing is a fad and is not something that's necessarily gonna stay. I think eventually people are gonna realize that the efficiency and the range matters to them more than the look of it or being able to go off-road. And you can totally go off-road in the same way with a 4-inch tire as you can with a 3.5 or 3.25 inch tire. So I think a lot of this is just following the trend of having a fat tire e-bike. Would I get this bike if I didn't have kids? The answer is yes, totally. Like I said earlier, it's great for solo riding. If you are not necessarily going to use it to run errands or big errands that would necessitate you carrying anything more than what would fit in a backpack, then you don't need this dorky little front basket. Yeah, I do think it's a little dorky looking, even though I got it. But logistically, being able to carry the kids' backpack in there while they're sitting on the back, or me carrying groceries, having the weight on the bike as opposed to on my back is a lot better as far as center of gravity and just comfort, and you're not sweating back there. So, having the basket makes sense for logical reasons, but obviously it's not the prettiest looking. Although I will say that Juiced made it pretty cool by having this kind of taper down. So it's not just this square box like you would see most e-bikes having. So they did good for what it is, but if you were gonna be able to ride this without a front basket and you're just riding around the city, I think that would be a perfect scenario. Okay, now let's talk about some of the secrets of the e-bike, okay, of this particular rip racer. Okay, someone figured out that class 2 and class 3 has the same controller. Yes, so the class 2 bike actually has a class 3 controller in it. What does that mean? That means that theoretically, if you were to change the display, okay, this is the class 3 display. The class 2 display is a little bit more simplified and does not allow you to go to class 3 because there's no way to change the setting. So technically, if you bought a $1,000 class 2 e-bike rip racer and you paid $100 for the upgraded display, you can essentially turn it into a class 3 bike. So what's the drawback of that? Okay, number one, the drawback is the battery is gonna be a different size. Okay, the class 2 e-bike, I believe is like 10 point something amp hours as opposed, or maybe 12, as opposed to 15, 16 amp hours. So the battery is gonna be smaller. And if you're gonna go to class 3, I'm expecting that you would probably want to run it faster or ride it faster, and therefore depleting the battery quicker than you would normally. So it's kind of give and take. I still would say if you want class 3 speeds, to get the class 3. If you're okay with class 2, get class 2. A lot of stuff I don't necessarily recommend modifying. I mean, I'm a big tinkerer and accessory buyer and all that kind of stuff, and I do that, but it's not necessarily something I would recommend for other people. And for me, I'm not doing that either. Recently, okay, they've been talking about this for a year, okay? Juice has been talking about a year about creating an off-road controller, not for controller. So what does that mean? That means on throttle, you can go faster than 20, faster than 20 miles an hour on throttle only. And that is something that Juiced has done for a couple of their other bikes, creating that like super duper, we'll call it like a turbo mode for their bike. And right when we thought that Juiced forgot about it, they released it about a month ago. So that is available, but a controller is about $250. So keep that in mind, but it is an option. Some of you may ask, what is this? Yes, that's for feeding a derailleur cable. So there has been one person documented who has added a freewheel to this to add gears. 7 gears, where the shifter would be in this area. And that is something I may consider doing, but most likely I'll probably keep it stock as single gear, as it gets a little bit complicated. I'm not sure I want to deal with that right now with the Juiced bike, especially with other bikes available where that one's geared and this one is also geared. One more thing I really like about this is the right hand half twist throttle. A lot of the bikes these days have it on the left side, which is just annoying to me, and they're like thumb throttles, but there's a legitimate reason why people or companies have made left side throttles. And the reason is they have gears on the right. Okay, so by being able to throttle on one side, you can change gears on the other side simultaneously. If you were to have throttle and gears on one side, your thumb and fingers can only do one thing at a time, and it's not going to be as efficient as far as accomplishing both throttle and gear changes at the same time. All right, let's talk a second about top-mounted batteries versus under-mounted batteries. So some companies have batteries that are mounted on the bottom, and my concern about that is not only that stuff, debris from the road can kick up onto it and damage it or just get it dirty and gross, is that, I mean, no one's really reported, okay, some people reported it, but I don't think it's a very common enough deal to really worry about. But people have been reporting that bottom-mounted batteries can fall off. I mean, I think it's user error where they just didn't click it in place well enough and they fall off. So by having top mounted, you're not going to worry about that really falling off because it's on top, and you're going to feel and hear the click, and everything should be fine. But I do prefer top mounted batteries like this as opposed to under mounted. I do get the attraction of an under mounted one because it's integrated and it's clean and it doesn't look like there's this big giant thing on there. But as far as convenience of taking it out and not having to deal with the obstruction of a tire and getting in that small gap to release your battery, I think is actually a good compromise. And I do prefer the big battery being on top. Juiced, amongst other companies, say that this handle is for easy moving of the bike. And I don't necessarily find that's true, because if you're gonna lift it, you're not really gonna lift, 65 pounds worth of stuff by this plastic handle. When I lift it, I just stick my finger in here and I actually lift the whole seat. So whether this piece of plastic is here or not doesn't really matter, but I do like it. And part of me picked this bike because of this, although I could change the saddle very easily. It has a handle, and this is the handle I use for my kids. When one child is sitting on there, they use this handle, and I don't have to have some ugly looking thing sticking out and coming up like that. So this allows more butt space and a cleaner look by having the handle up there integrated into the seat. One more thing about the brakes. Okay, I mentioned earlier, squeaky brakes, change them resin, they'll be fine. Okay, but the calipers that Juice used, terrible. Okay, why is it terrible? Because they are from some unknown company where they did not make standard size calipers to fit a standard size pad. So to make the pads fit, you really have to sand them down. You actually have to sand down the pads so that they're not as wide as they are, and that they're slightly narrower by like a millimeter so they can fit into the caliper, which is terrible. And I hope Juiced addresses that, acknowledges that, and changes that for future bikes. But just know that the Juiced Rip Racer, as it's manufactured now, does have calipers that do not fit standard size brake pads as you buy them. You will have to sand them down. It's not that big of a deal because you're not going to be changing pads that often, hopefully. But it is something that you should be expected to have to do. And don't be surprised if that's the case, because I'm telling you, that's the case. All right, no one has complained about this other than me, but because of the weight of the bike, the kickstand tends to get very loose. So I do have to tighten these bolts from time to time. And not only that, but I did change the angle of it. There were times that in strong wind or just uneven surfaces, I know, use your error, the bike would fall down. Oh, that's another thing I should talk to you about. When the bike fell down, it's fallen down like 3 times, okay? Not with me on it, I was doing stuff and it fell over. This is the damage from that falling. And here, the brake lever. Oh, and here. And that is it. The whole thing literally fell over 3 times. And the screen is fine, and the grip is fine, the seat is fine. Oh yeah, I think maybe the pedal. Yeah, right there is a little bit scratched. So I let one of my friend's wives ride this, and he didn't tell me that she didn't really know how to ride a bike until after she was on it. So she did drop it. Another time I was helping someone collect garbage and put it back in their bins, and I stopped my bike to help them, and then it was on a hill and kind of uneven surface and it fell down. So, and that was it. All right, that's it. That is the end of the video. I hope you learned more than a couple things about the juiced whip racer and have an idea about whether it is for you or not. If you do have questions, this is a small channel, unsponsored, so leave a comment. I will get back to you. So take care. Best of luck. See ya.